everybody, to the Heroes of Agape podcast once again. My name is Sergio, formerly known as Saenz, and I'm here with my co-host, Adam, formerly known as Rodriguez. We're both veterans that are heavily involved with the Agape Heroes program for Agape Church for the Soul, Mind, and Body, which services veterans and first responders who are looking to partake in our sacred medicine ceremonies in order to overcome symptoms like post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, anxiety, stress, things of that nature that science is now finding our sacraments are helpful for. So we open up that spiritual experience for people to have in safe circumstances here at our church, Agape Church for the Soul, Mind, and Body. So welcome back and thank you all for being here. How you doing, Adam?
I'm doing good. Tired, but it's like one of the normal things for me. But
no, for sure.
But good. I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. Same thing, keeping busy. And, if you can't tell, I've been recording a lot lately, so my voice is going out. I apologize to y'all for that, but nonetheless, I have a bunch of music coming out, podcasts. We're actually joining our friends at the Medevac podcast tomorrow in San Antonio, so we're taking a trip down there to spread the word about Agape Heroes and give a little insight into what the church is involved with today. So yeah, we're really excited. We make that trip this evening, and so I'm all over the place, no different than you. Yeah, but yeah, today we really just wanted to take the opportunity to give you all a little glimpse into our backstory, what got us involved in plant medicine, dealing with the symptoms and the consequences of living through post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury, which is both of our experiences with the call to communing with plant medicines and entheogens in general. So Adam, I know a part of your story, but I'd love to hear, and I'd love for you to share, what it is that compelled you to start on this path. And it's been a journey for you. I've been privileged to witness, but I'd love for you to share with our audience what that looked like for you.
Yeah, I guess I'll start in 2008. Last time I kind of covered this kind of after divorce, which is relatively traumatic for children, but as much as it did affect me, it didn't at the same time. But I netted like an amazing stepfather. My dad's amazing too, but from a skill set standpoint, he, brought martial arts and firearms into my life. And so, I'm basically a brown belt level before I'm 18 and training with literally police and SWAT. And of course, 9/11 happened. Like a lot of us around our age, like wanted to go serve and do the right thing, or it felt like the right thing, and everything was pretty good. I was not a perfect human being, but I felt pretty in control of my destiny. Like I felt like I knew exactly where I was going. But in 2008, when I experienced a brain injury, it looking back, it was very obvious that there's immediately some issues. But I think because of the context of being where we were, it was not obvious at the time. And so in this particular deployment, I was with what they call Task Force 27. It's just 27 Marines. So we went forward as a company plus with certain specialty MOSs, in intelligence and special operations. And then we were heavy grunts, and then there was me. And if you don't know my story, if you know my background, I got a lot of skills, but I was not traditionally in Marine Corps or any of those related to those directly. I worked with them, but that was not my thing. I was a logistics guy, what I dubbed as ground logistics. So we're not so much admin. We're out there, doing the thing. And the easiest description I can give for my job is we do so many things, but like Saving Private Ryan, there's those crazy dudes on the beach guiding everything, getting blown up. That was us. We had like a life expectancy of 10 seconds in World War II. And we got decommissioned as a combat MOS in the 90s because we were not doing as much as all the hardcore stuff. But the mentality was there. So we were all, good shape people, but we were pogues, for lack of a better term, and I enjoyed it because it was easy to kind of be good at what I did. It wasn't complex, and I got to travel all over the world. So this particular deployment, they hand selected me in my company because of my expertise, and then I had selected my team. Come to find out, we were all in different places, like Marja, and I was in Sandgate, and all these different places, and so I was solo there, and I patrolled. I did, all basically in Sandgate it was all foot patrols. The only mounted was like for either medevac or the response to emergency thing. What's it called? You know what I'm talking. You all know. What's it called? It's just an emergency response. Like someone gets hit and they got to drive out there really fast, so they run all over the crops, and like so that we couldn't do that because a lot of crops there. It's a whole other story. But like I'm doing the thing, the grunt thing, the whatever thing. I'm working with all these people. I've been holding an officer billet in the COC, calling for fire, calling for medevacs. Like the CO and the XO trained me. Like it was like the most ridiculous experience of my life. But I probably learned more on that deployment in 9 months than I did my entire Marine Corps career, 8.5 years. But this one particular day, our generator went down, and we only had one other generator we sourced in all of southern Afghanistan, and it was just a piece of crap. It just didn't work very well. The mechanic was like, we might get a day or two out of it. So the SEAL looked to me, he's like, hey man, you're a logistics guy. Like, how do we get this out of here really fast and get it back? I was like, well, we can do it by helicopter. He goes, do I have to land because we don't have any forklifts? I'm like, no, we can do an external lift. I got a couple slings, and I can do all that math. And so there's, helicopter doesn't crash, whatever. And so we put together a plan in about an hour. I set up what's called a crow's foot. They came in at midnight, and I recruited one of my buddies, and he was just like, I was like, look, man, like, I don't have my equipment. My leadership set me forward without what I was supposed to have for my job, which sounds minor. Like if you got sent forward, like, with not enough ammo, like that's a pretty bad circumstance. It was kind of the same for my gear, even though it wasn't combat oriented. Because what those helicopters do is they generate about 250,000 volts of static electricity through weather and being in the air, and with to ground that. And in the schoolhouse, we're taught that if you don't, you can die. That's kind of was like, that was it. Mm-hmm. But the mission had to get done, otherwise the COC was going to dump. It was like a 10-day there and back to convoy, so that wasn't an option. And the COC or the SEAL was pretty stressed, like, we need to get this fixed. So I guess it was up to me to kind of figure it out. And so I sourced what our actual piece is, like a 5-foot pole insulated with fiberglass, and we ground it. And it's just a long cord to the ground. Very simple. Like a monkey can do it.
Right.
Without that, you're a dead monkey. So I sourced a 3-foot chain connected to a wooden handle with like some metal thing like this. And I was like, I remember looking at it and be like, this is all you guys got? I got it from the Brits. They're like, yeah, that's all we got. I was like, mother of God, like this is not going to be the day for me. Part of me was thankful I accepted at 18, joined the Marine Corps, that I'd probably die really young. So, here I'm at 22, kind of about to face that. And so I recruited one of my buddies, 2 combat deployments to Iraq, grunt. And I was like, look, man, like I'm going to ground this thing and I might collapse. I might pass out. So just drag me off to LZ like you would dragging someone out of a firefight, and just, call the doc. Mm-hmm. And he was like, okay, cool. Like it just sounded normal, right? So, midnight, it's pitch black. We got our gear on for protection. And the helicopters that come in really fast and, come in and out really fast because we don't know what RPGs are out there, what they want to do. We're being mortared. And so it has to be really fast movement. So they come in and they're maybe there for 40 seconds at most, but they come in real fast. I ground it and I collapse. So all 250,000 volts of static electricity, I remember seeing it hit that piece of metal and arcing towards my face. That's all I remember. And then it was just black. I mean, just black. And like parts of me remember like feeling like it was a long time. And like I don't know how long, but like longer than what it was, like milliseconds. I collapsed and I caught myself falling, and I stood up, and my buddy was there with the load like frozen. And I'm like, man, this dude was not, that's why I got him, because like he's a combat hardened guy. Mm-hmm. So I had to take the load from him. I attached to the ring. It shocked me again because it reloads after 35 seconds. So it was real low. But that 250K went through my what I think is my brain, because that's what ended up being really affected. And right off the LZ, and like he just looked at me. He was like, "Dude, I thought you died. Like you looked dead." And sometimes I feel like I did, because it was like my life, like I shared last time, went from like working like kind of to my favor to just. And looking back, it was. I mean, my chest hurt for a week. My heart was sore for a month. I mean, immediately I started having migraines, and I just thought it was nutrition, because I was a fitness nutrition guy. So, maybe it's the water, it's the nutrition, it's the environment. Like kind of going outward to what was happening versus thinking it was me. We had experiences where, I don't want to get vivid, with people are being blown up and people are getting shot and people are taking shrapnel. And here I am with all my limbs, and I'm like, I must be okay. So there's a little bit of neglect on my part, not going to the doc, thinking that. I remember being on patrol and like laying there and holding a position and falling asleep. And that wasn't like me. Like in boot camp, they do things that make you fall asleep, and I was just the guy, I can be up as long as you need me to be. And like I started falling asleep, and so I couldn't patrol anymore, because they're like, dude, like what? I was super embarrassed. It was, it sucked being so good at all the things I was good at, and then like, you can't leave the wire, like we don't know what's wrong with you. So I felt deficient almost immediately. So migraines, passing out, like just uber tired, but then so tired that when I would go down to sleep, I couldn't sleep. And I thought maybe it's just the stress and getting shot at and people blowing up. So at first I thought it was PTSD, and like it was a very traumatic. I mean, our unit had the highest suicide rate in the Marine Corps leaving that deployment until like, I don't know how many years later. And it's not a pride thing, but it just showed how traumatic that deployment was. Like as crappy as all that was, like I that's what I thought it was for me. And then come to find out years and years later, it was the brain injury. So it's kind of the preface before medicine. I don't know if you want to keep going or not.
No, I think it's really interesting, and there's a lot of detail there that I wasn't privileged to before. So I appreciate you sharing that. What did that look like? So you have the experience and your life, you mentioned starts falling apart, but what does that actually look like for you? At the time, did you have commitments? Were you married? Like, were you still single and in the military? And how did you see that start surfacing into your life?
Yeah, so I was one of those smart Marines. They got married at 18 going in, so that was a bad decision. That marriage was starting to dissolve just before that deployment. It was just bad. I mean, she was cheating on me all the time. I'm deployed. Like, I really was trying to be the good guy, and just forgiving her, because I got it. Like, I'm gone in a year, sometimes 14, 15 months at a time, maybe a couple of weeks home. Like, I was really busy my first 4 years. And, but before that point, I made a hard decision. Like, no, like I don't need that in my life, or whatever. But like, I felt so dead inside that I needed this exterior love. And so like, I ended up trying to rework it out with her. Like, and so that was another re-experience of trauma in another way. It's like, I have such a black hole in my heart, not just from deployment, from just feeling like I was dead. But I try to re-engage that relationship. So that was like one of the first major things that was like, even I was like questioning myself, like, what am I doing? That was like major one, like the first thing. The other was I remember this picture was taken while we were retrograding back home, and like you look at me in the picture and I looked dead in the eyes. Like I just was like not there. And that's just how I felt. So there's like this beingness of just like I just like I was like not content at all, like indifferent in the worst way possible. Like I didn't care about anything. It was a weird transition to from who I was. So those were like the two main things. And then because of those two things, as many of us deal with, PTSD or even brain injuries or both, is I went to drinking. I remember getting home and I had nowhere to go. The ex-wife and I at the time, wife at the time were separated. She was living at home. I had nothing to come home to. So I was like, I'm just living in my car. And so that's what I did. And a week after I checked into the unit, one of my good buddies now, Sam, I don't know if he's watching this, probably because he's a great supporter of me, but he was like, dude, like, just come live with me. Like, you can't be living in your car, man. But I just didn't care. Like, I just was like, I don't care. Like, I just want to die. Like, and I never felt like that deep of like just not wanting to be alive in my life. But it was like such an indifferent way that I wasn't trying to actively kill myself. It was just like, I don't know, like if I get robbed in my car, someone shoots me, cool, like whatever, man. Like, so it's very passive. Um, so I started living with him. And I, like they were not a perfect family, but they were a tight family. Like they had like their children, whatever. And I was like, man, like I don't have that. So like then relating to what I was missing, or what I thought I was missing from a marriage, a marriage that was never going to work. I just went to drinking. But that wasn't until after I realized I couldn't sleep.
Right.
I mean, I would be up till 5 a.m. and had to get up at 5:30. And then like I'd be like, dude, I gotta go sit down, and I would pass out like sitting down. Like I would sleep at the worst times, and I could never sleep when I needed to. So that was like 3 and 4, like so things started. And then we're talking. I got back first week of December, and this is like first week of January that I'm realizing these things, at least in a relatively unconscious way. So I started drinking about a 12-pack a night just to pass out. And I did that for quite a few months. Luckily, I was an MMA guy. And so I would use my getting ready for fights as an excuse to not drink. And so I had relatively healthy coping mechanisms. But then, and like before, I was very healthy with my spending, with my consumption of alcohol, where like everything was an extreme. So I'd go work out 3 times a day, 2 hours a day to fight. I'd run my Marines for an hour or two, once or twice a day. I do the helicopter missions until midnight, 2 a.m. I mean, I was just running on red, in red, revving my RPMs to the max all the time. And I was like, well, maybe that's why I'm tired. And I would take a break. I'd take some leave because I haven't taken leave in 3.5 years, 4 years. And I was just as tired, not doing anything. And I was like, oh my gosh, so I keep myself busy. And so we're talking like January now. So I'm like back for 2.5 months. And like, I mean, everything is falling apart from now I'm an alcoholic. It turned to the point I started consuming marijuana because I could not cope enough. And I just needed and I'd only do it on leave or in between things, sometimes on the weekends. And like, I was very shameful of that because of the whole rule thing. But at the same time, I was like, man, like I'm a better asset alive to the Marine Corps than dead. And so like, at least like I'm just keeping alive every other weekend, drinking, smoking weed. Every weekend I was throwing up, I mean, this was like, that was best case scenario. Like I felt alive at least, like it was very horrible looking back, but I was like, at least I'm alive, like this is telling me I'm alive and I can get back to my week. And so that just went on for about a year until my body started fighting me back. I started having these weird, like, I don't know where migraines. Basically I had a migraine for about 9 months. It just didn't stop. And that was from, about early. So I got back late 2008, all through 2009, early 2010. I was like this, just kind of a maniac. No one knew. That was the other thing. Like I was like 8% body fat, like 175 pounds of just like pure muscle on a 5'8" frame, like fighter. I can outrun anybody with anything on my body. Like I was an animal. So no one knew I was smoking weed the weekends. No one even knew I drank or smoked cigarettes. Like they just thought I was like this picture perfect Marine because that's how I presented to the world.
Right.
And it was so I suffered more because no one knew my story. And I didn't realize how important that was back then. But early 2010, I had this one migraine for 9 months. And I started having these allergic reactions to foods like tomatoes, like most random things. And I would drink a beer and I'd get a worse migraine. So it was like my body was like, dude, like we need to keep you alive. Like
Right.
can't be doing these things. And that was kind of the lead up to 2011 when I kind of went full clean, just like cold turkey.
Right. What an incredible story. And it's interesting for me because there's so many likenesses for 2 different symptoms, or 2 different diagnoses, like TBI and for me is post-traumatic stress. Like, so the way that they show up in your life seems to be in the same form, like, and I think a lot of it has to do with the culture of the military and alcohol being such an acceptable form of coping with stress, anxiety, hypervigilance, and things of that nature, which are all, indicative of a problem, in your brain, like that you're having to stifle the voice or the action that your brain is calling for with alcohol, and it's pretty much the same way that I started, identifying that there may be an issue with me, because similar to you, I deployed pretty frequently in the 6 years that I was in the Air Force, and same thing, like other than I wasn't electrocuted, I was electrocuted a lot because I was, an engineer that worked on satellite terminals, and in the nature of which I would go and make repairs. It was outside of the wire in a copper, a fob, so the longer it took me to do the job, the longer I was exposed to the elements that were dangerous in that area. So I always made sure, like, if I jumped out from our main base to a copper or fob, I would stay awake until the job was done. So usually that was 2 or 3 days, and just continuously working and running off of tobacco and energy drinks, so it wasn't the healthiest of situations, but nonetheless, in that environment, you get shocked every now and then, but just not to the maximum like you were exposed to. But it all kind of relates to each other, because we come back, and what is normal? Usually the first thing you do is you go and you visit your family, but then after that, your unit gets together and gets wasted, for like a month, at least that's my experience. We would just all were telling the same stories and reliving and coping with alcohol, and all of us had time off when we came back. So some went and visited their families, but they did the same thing. They all kind of, in my observation, leaned heavily on alcohol, so that's a depressant, so all we're doing is shoving these emotions and these experiences deep down, and to the point where the alcohol is no longer the answer, and your life starts to get impacted by that. Like for me, it carried me for a little while where I was drinking alcohol and, in heavy amounts, in shameful amounts of alcohol, similar to you. A 12-pack was really easy for me to get through, and that was either a daily or several times a week scenario. And I kick myself, for any active duty that may be watching this, when a doctor asks you how frequently you drink, don't lie, dude. Because they're asking you that to see what you're going through. And for me, I thought I was going to get in trouble for the amount that I was consuming. But in reality, I wish I had all that data so that it could support my disability case and really just help diagnose me in that way, And I'll get to that in a minute, but how hard it was for me to come clean and even suggesting that there may be something wrong with me. But in that experience, similar to you, the alcohol was kind of keeping me baseline. And that's a beautiful story that was shared to me by the psychiatrist in the VA that allowed me to kind of understand what post-traumatic stress is he painted the picture of imagining myself on a camping trip in the woods. You're in the woods, everything is going fine, and then all of a sudden a bear shows up, right? We're heightened from our normal baseline because there's a bear and there's danger and perceivable threat. But when you deploy for 6 months to a year, or 15 months in your case, then what happens? You're living with the bear for that long. So you initially get heightened, but then you stay in that heightened state, and that becomes your normal baseline. So when you come back into a peaceful environment, you're having trouble finding that baseline again because, staying hypervigilant is what kept you alive, So when we come back, we're having to cope with people not being on the same level as we were in the community, really the community that we were in when we were deployed, on side of our brothers and sisters. So it becomes a really daunting exercise to accept that for ourselves. And for me, that came out, as I would hear a loud noise outside, and all of a sudden I'd be crawling around my house on all fours, hiding myself from windows, expecting that somebody was shooting at me, in middle Georgia, like, and, there is some crime there, like, but it's never pointed or targeted like at a soldier, for absolutely no reason, but in my head, I was creating these scenarios that were bringing me right back to what I was exposed to in Afghanistan, so it's for me, it's really interesting, but it's also kind of like, just clarifying that the symptoms would remain the same, and it makes sense that it's a cultural issue, like if we're all drowning ourselves in alcohol to cope with our problems, then it doesn't matter what your problem is, have a drink and it'll go away, but that's essentially what ruined my life, is becoming so dependent on alcohol. I couldn't be in social situations without drinking. I was a contractor, and for about a year and a half, I lived in Afghanistan, working for the army. There was not any alcohol there, but nonetheless, the culture then was video games, so another, it can be a very toxic environment when you get a bunch of competitive people together to play video games, like there's a lot of negativity, especially with games like Call of Duty and those first person shooters where, the objective is to kill each other, So in either case, that was my crutch while I was deployed as a civilian, was any downtime we were playing video games for too many hours, And then I get back and alcohol is acceptable again. So when I decided I no longer wanted to be satellite communications engineer, because it meant I was going to be in austere locations for the rest of my life. The only reason people hire someone to set up satellite communications is because it's too expensive to run wire, or it's far away from a civilization, So that meant time away from my family. At that time, my son, Sergio Jr., was getting to the point where he noticed that I was gone. And I remember the pivoting point being, my ex-wife sent me a photo of him hugging the laptop and calling the laptop daddy, and because I was a satellite communications engineer, I always had Zoom. And so really at the time it was Skype. So I was making video calls with him really regularly, and he started associating his relationship with me to the laptop. So I made a decision to leave that all behind. I was really privileged in having an alternative in my family business, which is insurance, So I always tell everybody I got in trouble a lot in high school, which meant that I worked a lot in my parents' office, like filing and learning about insurance, because when I was grounded, they wouldn't leave me at the ranch, because I would get into trouble. Instead, they brought me into the office and made me learn about insurance. So when I was ready to transition into an insurance agent, I took my test and passed it on my first attempt, and jumped into this completely different world. From military exposure, even as a civilian, I was working directly for the Army. Going straight into civilian, corporate kind of scenario was very, very difficult for me.
Yeah, because it's almost like the bear example, like that extreme, and you just like, it's like a bear jumps in front of you, and then you're okay, now you're with your family, you're in a corporate environment. It's like, wait, are you the bear?
No, exactly. And then what I was leading into is that the culture didn't change, so once I get into sales, what's really prevalent in sales is taking people out to mixers, continuing to drink alcohol, continuing to abuse the body, and losing sleep and showing up to work, because I was a very functional alcoholic. In that same time frame, I was going out at all hours of the night, abusing alcohol, abusing drugs. I had problem with drugs that surfaced through my alcohol consumption too, that all kind of led me into this spiral, that allowed me to accept that there was something wrong with me. As you continue to compress all of these emotions, all of these feelings that are arising, I remember always exploding on people, and I was a smart ass, so it made it kind of funny, but I was hurting people around me, I would really quickly correct an action by being a smart ass, by saying something witty and making that person feel bad, but it was acceptable because it was funny, like very militarily, right? Like that's also, prevalent in the military culture too. So, violent actions started coming out, where I remember coming back and talking to my ex-wife after binge drinking all night that I actually hadn't drank as much alcohol as I had, trying to convince her that I wasn't in the state that she was watching, unfold in front of her eyes. And it got to the point where I got so frustrated that she wouldn't believe me that I punched a hole through a door, and like opened up a huge cut in my hand, ended up passing out. And I wake up on the couch, she had bandaged my hand and taken care of the situation. But that was kind of the eye opener for me. Even though I've had violence in my life, I'm never consider myself a violent person. I wasn't the guy that started fights or anything like that, but I was in them. Like it was just kind of these situations as a young man grows up, you find yourself in, but it was never something I was actively looking out for, so this was the opportunity that allowed me to start looking at myself. And when I started that process, so much came up for me that I considered unacceptable behavior. The hypervigilance, the social anxiety. I stopped drinking after that, as I always did. I would always be like, an episode would happen and I'd say, for the next 30 days, I'm not going to drink. And all that was my apology to the person that I had hurt. It's not that I ever wanted to stop drinking. I just put a finish line, an objective, like if I can make it to 30 days, as soon as I do, I'm going to have a beer, or I'm going to have a glass of whiskey or whatever the case was. And then you start the cycle over again. But so this in particular, this situation allowed me to look further into my situation and accept for the first time that there was something wrong with me. So I started working with the VA, and even that, posed its own, its own obstacles, if you will, because I was lying to them too. I wanted them to believe that I was okay, even though I wasn't. And to the point where I remember talking to the psychologist, and he was concluding his study on me and told me, what, I really appreciate the participation, considering what you were exposed to, we don't think that you have PTSD. And I remember breaking down in that moment, crying in front of this man, and him leaning in and just kind of like observing me in shock and saying, "You want to expand on your emotions?" And I said, I apologize. I feel like I've wasted your time. I've wasted my time. But the reality is I've been acting this entire time. I've been remaining cool, calm, and collected and telling you exactly what you need to hear so that you can tell me that there's nothing wrong with me, but I know in my heart that there's something wrong with me. It's like I'm dying inside. I feel like I'm killing myself. That's what brought me into this office, and I'm here to finally own that. And it hurts, So then he said, well, you want to start over? And we started with the first checklist that I ever had to go through in his office, where it's like, how much alcohol are you drinking? How much sleep are you getting? The baseline. And once we were done, he was blown away. It was like, now that you're telling the truth, we can get somewhere. Now we can help you, So I found myself on 11 different prescriptions at the end of that, and I was following the rules. I was very much only coping with what the military, allowed. I was drinking a lot of alcohol, so that, they consider it to be a problem, but it's an understandable problem for them. Like, so I wasn't using any drugs at that time. It was very much, I'm going to take these prescriptions and this is going to save my life, and it did open my eyes and allow me to be a better observer, for sure, because I immediately started noticing the differences in my behavior to a point where I could recognize that there used to be a problem. I couldn't explain why there wasn't anymore, but I knew that what I was taking was helping me, and it was helping me manage the situation, rather than curing me. But that only lasted, 5 years. At right around the 5-year mark, I started drinking heavily again. I started using drugs again, and it was because I couldn't feel myself anymore. I was this cookie cutter person. So all of my personality, all of my character had been subdued by all of the pharmaceuticals I was taking. So once I recognized that, the only thing that would bring life out of me was alcohol and drugs. I could only feel something again with alcohol and drugs. So when you start mixing prescription drugs with alcohol, then at some point, I promise, I don't care who you are, you're going to spiral out of control. And that's what happened for me. I remember the moment that I realized that it wasn't working for me anymore was I had again taken out, some clients to a mixer. I got home at like 4 a.m, knowing that my son had an award ceremony and that we needed to be there at 8:30 in the morning. So rather than getting sleep, because I was afraid that I was going to go to sleep and not wake up on time, I decided that it would be better to continue using drugs and drinking alcohol to get through this award ceremony and then just come back and sleep it off, So I continued drinking. Long story short, when I woke up, it was 3:00 in the afternoon and my son was sitting on the couch next to me watching TV. As soon as I woke up, he said, "Oh, good, now we can go to the award ceremony." And I look at my clock and it was already, well past 8 a.m. So my heart broke instantly. That's when I realized that my life was, a catastrophe at that point. So, without that, and really it was such a painless act. Like when I look back, there's a lot of veterans that have much harder lessons to learn from this than I had, so I'm really grateful for the grace in that way, like where it was an emotional, trigger that caused this change in me. But that's when I decided to start seeking out alternatives to pharmaceuticals, and this is a perfect caveat because it's really what I'd like people to come to terms with, because we all are essentially were in the same position that y'all are in right now. Anyone who's watching this who is considering using ayahuasca or psilocybin or bufo or San Pedro as an effective way to overcome your symptoms and your ailments, how crazy was it to accept that these plants could be something that helped us, especially after committing yourself to the regimen of the VA? And for me, it was impossible to conceive. I had already had a working relationship with psilocybin. I grew up on a cattle farm, so eventually you get curious when you grow up raising cattle. You hear the stories, and all of a sudden you find yourself early in the morning looking through cow patties for a good time, But nonetheless, I'd love to hear what that approach looked like for you, in your exploration and discovery of the awareness of these types of plant medicines.
Yeah. One part I'll add real quick. I was on, I think, 3 pharmaceuticals leaving the Marine Corps. And after a month and a half, one of my buddies was like, "Dude, what's wrong with you?" I went from, very relatively charismatic and kind of very talkative, just mute. And the second he said that, I was like, oh, there's something weird happening. So even though the symptoms felt like they eased for a bit, still really tired. But instead of being constantly irritable, I would just blow up once a week and I would, take it out on my Marines.
Yeah.
So eventually it was January I got off of it. Once I got out of the Marine Corps in that late 2012. So I say that because January of 2013, I'm about a month out of the Marine Corps. I'm like, I can't do that. I started smoking marijuana full time. I don't know if that's a gig out there, but at the time I got paid a lot of money for it. This is the only thing that I could do that I didn't feel like blowing my brains out every moment. I didn't feel like, if anything, it made me more who I was, and I'm a nerd. I like to research, so I started researching. And as many veterans, at least maybe in the realm that I was associated, went down the conspiracy theory hole. And so from about January to maybe August of 2013, I just went down this deep rabbit hole, anti everything, or this is dumb, or that's the system thing, right? And I was just in this cycle, and I just every time I run across a crazier video, I just smoke more weed. And I realized that was kind of a pattern. I was like, oh, I feel all right. I just don't know if I wake up feeling all right the next day because I feel guilty. I said, that shame in me smoking weed. I was never a proud weed smoker. I just was I just don't want to blow my brains out. So like it was about that August that I found this video on spirituality. And it was like how like you go down these rabbit holes, it kind of keeps you in that like either sadness or anger state in the grief period, and you never get out of it because you just keep re-engaging those theories or whatever, making yourself angry and sad and depressed, whatever again. It's like the best way out spirituality. And at the time, I mean, I didn't share this part, but I guess it's, I don't know if you've seen Step Brothers, but like they're like, I'm gonna start at the end, I'm gonna go brief at the beginning, back to the middle. I don't do it on purpose, but that's how it happens sometimes.
Yeah.
But I basically denounced God. Like I didn't really grow up in any spiritual way. My family claimed Christianity, but we weren't really that. My dad for like 30 years went to church. That's all I remember. So maybe there's a baseline of Christianity there, but it wasn't like a thing that we practiced.
Right.
So I never really had one feeling one way or the other for any religion. Wasn't pro, wasn't anti, just I was indifferent. But after the war, especially what I experienced in Sangin, I mean, I was like, how could there be a God? You know, and I wanted to believe, so I never claimed atheism, but I was pretty like, I don't understand. And so when I saw the spirituality video, I was like, oh crap, like maybe there's something to this. Because in that January, when I got off those pills, all the pharmaceuticals, I was sitting on my porch planning to blow my brains out. Like, should I drive here? Where should I drive? Should I let them find me? Should I not let them find me? And I had this like crazy tingling go down my spine. And it was like, don't fucking do that. And I didn't feel like me, but like, it was like this weird, like I was like, oh, like I scared myself. And so those two things connected to me from January to August of like, keep going down here. You're on the path of something. And there are YouTube videos, and I feel like this is very common. Like someone's like, oh, if you're feeling like that, try ayahuasca. And I was like, what is ayahuasca? You know, I don't even know if I pronounced it correctly back then. So I went down another rabbit hole of ayahuasca, like researching like people's experiences, how they're doing in the US. I could not afford to go to Peru. I'm a broke veteran. You know, with my girlfriend now, wife, longtime wife now at the time, but you know, she was just getting started her career. And I just felt weird as a man, like, hey, I need money to go heal myself. Like, I didn't want her to ever, she knew it, but like, I didn't want her to think I was weak. Not that I was weak, that I was broken, you know? And so I think by September, I had contacted a shaman in Peru that was willing to send me ayahuasca. Like, I don't know if that's okay or not, but he just basically made me pay for shipping. I think I paid like $12 for international shipping, and he sent me like a little bottle of ayahuasca disguised in like a soap bottle. The whole time I'm like, man, this guy might just be a murderer, like he's just poisoning people. But I was hitting rock bottom to the point where like, I don't even care if I die in my living room doing this, thank you. And so I drank it. That was the first time I touched ayahuasca, was I think September of 2013. Nothing happened. I purged. So like that was, I felt like it was pretty real because I had like the purge. Doing it here, I recognized that was the purge. But no psychedelic, nothing. Like it was just like, just in like a physical purging, maybe some heightening in like my senses and hearing, and that was it. And I was like, well, that was useless. And so I just kind of left it in the freezer for 3 years, ended up throwing it out. Cause I was kind of scared after that. Like, I don't know what would happen deeper, but I feel like it catalyzed me into my growth, and don't recommend that at all, by the way. That was just how dark it was for me. I didn't know people like Sergio existed. I didn't know you could even do it in the US. Like, I was in a forum of guys that like brewed their own brew because we couldn't access it in 2013. So like that was the only reason. I don't recommend it at all.
Well, and that's exactly what this effort is. Is raising the awareness so that people do not have to order from a random shaman in Peru. You know, there's a lot better way to have that experience, but continue. Yeah,
and with that, my biggest fear is that it was bullshit and that I was gonna be poisoned. Like the people we trust, like just use the vehicles we have. But it did catalyze me into my first panic attack. I never had anxiety. Even with the, you know, I mean, I know with the TBI, there was a form of PTSD, like survivor's guilt, different things. I was hyper alert because of my training from teenage to now being really aware how dangerous and how untrustworthy people can be. Because one thing I did leave out is that the Taliban had recruited the police that worked on our base to kill us in our sleep. So it's very paranoid.
Right.
The story is, it's like, I don't know, it's weird. So I was a very paranoid person after that because of that. So I didn't trust anybody for that reason. Like, are you Taliban? Like, who's here to like? So I understand why my buddy, who was in a particular realm of intelligence, why he was so paranoid, and I only had a taste of it. And so, so I started having really massive anxiety attacks, and to the point I ended up in the ER. And I thought I was dying because I never had anxiety, never experienced anxiety, like literally not even a hint of anxiety in my life up until that point. Like, it was the weirdest thing. So it was like, just like getting punched in the face with it. Like hard time breathing. I was blaming the environment. I was blaming, the chemtrails. Like, I was like externalizing it all. Like, it's everything else, it's not me, And then all of a sudden in the hospital, I'm like, I'm dying.
Yeah.
But that got me to reduce the weed consumption. It's like my body was always working with me to try and get me to the next phase. And that time it was making me reduce my weed consumption so I can function in the world again. I learned a tremendous amount smoking weed. So I'm not saying it's bad, but socially, because of my embarrassment and shame, I didn't go out. And it was my mechanism to survive. So it made me reduce my consumption. And fast forward, from 2013, that was December, to 2021, moving to Texas, I was still interested in ayahuasca. After 2020, I was like, man, like, our son is born. Like, I cannot function. Like, I don't want my son growing up with a dead father because he can't handle himself. And so plant medicines came back in my head. And when I moved to Texas, I told my dad this, my biological father. So he was searching around to help me. And he brought up Bufo. And I was like, I have no idea what Bufo is. He goes, oh, it's like ayahuasca, but it's shorter. And it's supposed to work really well. So I did that.
Yeah.
And that was August of 2021. The first time I just cried. It was like a black hole of I realized how much in life I attached to in my trauma, how much as a people pleaser, as kind of like that martyr, like going to the war to 18 in 2004, sacrificing myself with the helicopter, like kind of being that I realized that my childhood being a people pleaser, trying to please my parents, please people around me, manifested in wartime, manifested as a Marine. And it showed me like, dude, like, you kind of brought this on yourself. And I was like, what? So that just made me more depressed. And I came back for a second ceremony, and that was when an extremely profound experience happened with Bufo. It showed me basically just that I can heal from the brain injury relatively. I don't know if it'll ever go away because it's a very physical thing, how my brain's affected, but it showed me the potential that I can reach. And then March of 2022, before I get into that, I was working with a psychedelic integrator, which I highly recommend. So if you've done it or not do it, I recommend it. I'm a very intelligent person, I claim anyways, I feel, but I knew that like, this was so beyond me that I needed support, like I did therapy through the years, and like nothing they said was something I didn't already know. My wife was very smart. So like I get insight from her. So like I never felt like these tools helped me as much as a psychedelic integrator. And I was like considering ayahuasca, and this was probably January of 2022. And her name's Wendy. And she was like, oh, like, do you know Sergio? I'm like, I have no idea. She's like, he was in the Air Force. And I was like, Air Force, come on, guy. Typical Marine response, right?
Okay,
Not knowing his story, which is very profound, And his story is more common. It's not in the wartime, but very typical Marine response, and really realizing it was my ego, like not wanting a solution. It's wanting to be in the comfort of the misery. And I was like, oh, come on, She was like, no, like, he's super great. And then this part of me was like, you gotta be open, man. Stop being a douchebag, like, who cares? He's doing something that, whatever. And so I spoke to Sergio first time. It had to be like the beginning of February. I don't remember exactly, but just February sometime. And I was at the deepest of the deepest. Again, like I just was completely suicidal. Like, even though the Bufo gave me this profound view of potential, I was not feeling any of it. And so I contacted Sergio. We talked for, 15 or 20 minutes. And I was like, man, like, this guy's really been through it. Like, maybe he's got a tool that will help me. And going back to my 2013 experience, I was like, but like, I didn't experience anything. So anyway, March, I came here for a weekend ceremony, 3 sittings. And I remember vividly, it was you and Otto sitting against the vehicle. I mean, I was asking like just ridiculous questions because I could not fathom what was going to happen. And I'd done so much research being a nerd, and you always talk about this at the beginning of the ceremony or after the weekend. But like everyone's experience, like, am I going to do this? Or like, what's mine going to be? Who's it going to be like? So I was asking just ridiculous questions, really to like disassociate from why I was there, looking back. And it was
No, dude, don't apologize.
it was the most profound thing I'd ever experienced. I can't put it into words, but it was the most profound thing I ever experienced. It was extremely beautiful. Like there was no struggle for me. I'm not saying you won't feel that, but I think that I had done so much shadow work for 13 plus years with like really I dug into my childhood. I dug into everything I could to try and fix my brain. And just the medicine treated me so beautifully and gave me an amazing perspective that, you know, even just where I'm sitting right now and just like in the studio, sitting here with you, like doing this thing and having my story, listening to your story and finding just an absolute best friend that I could ever ask for to do this with and along with, and just even just follow the beauty of experiencing the brain injury and how it happened got me on the path where we can relate with our stories, where we can relate, and just the beauty and the perfection of everything and how just that, like the perspective shift was really it. I mean, I can talk about all these crazy things, but it was just a perspective shift in the beauty of my life story and my experiences just for me, how profoundly important that is and how it is for all of us. I mean, that weekend changed my life forever. And I've done it a couple more times since then.
I'd say. No, and that really is what it becomes for most people, you know, is reflecting and understanding that we have so much of the pain to be grateful for, you know, so much of the hard lessons to be grateful for. And I know that's hard for people to understand, but it's true. I wouldn't be here had I not suffered. I've put it in songs that I've written before. We suffer knowing that at some point it will help, you know, and that is a recognition that I have in my life now, that I'm just so grateful for all the hardship, all the pain, all of the lessons really that come into life, because it's given me the opportunity to stand in front of you and give you hope. You know, give people like Adam hope, people like that we'll have on our show. I don't want to spoil any of our guests, but creating that faith in people is the only reason I can do that is because of my story, you know, because of the relatability of my suffering. You know, like there is treasure to be had in sharing stories that other people can relate to, you know, and for that I'm grateful. You know, I'm grateful for your trust, you know, like, and I know we share these stories all the time, but to see the emotion arise still should be the testament to just how important this is in people's lives, you know, so and I feel the same way, you know, like since that day we've been in contact more than most, you know, so it's been a beautiful transition in my life too, to have you, you know, walk this path with me and seeing your evolution, you know, from the day that I met you to now is incredible. You know, I share your story more than you probably realize, but in either case, it's something that is attainable for a lot of people, you know, and that is what justifies the time and the effort that we're putting into the Heroes of Agape podcast, as well as the Agape Heroes program. You know, it's why you have sacrificed so much to make this available to people. It's why I sacrifice so much to make it available to people, because we know the people that we shared this experience with can benefit from the same thing that we have, and shift that perspective in knowing that all of that hardened us for the rest of our lives, to survive for the rest of our lives. Now, some people, they can be impacted to a point where it is detrimental, to recognizing either you're going to save your own life or you're going to take your own life, and that comes in many different forms. For me, it was alcohol abuse and taking every risk in the world, hoping that, something would happen where it was an honorable way to go, rather than taking my own life, So it's a tragedy that we hope to help in the ways that we can, in raising awareness, in raising funds, for allowing the financial burden to be shifted away from the people who are suffering towards their healing, instead of it being, the conflict in their life that is preventing them from overcoming their limitations. So, but no, thank you so much for that clarity. And it's always, it doesn't shock me anymore how much we have in common, like that's usually the conversation we have after podcasts like this is like, dude, I can't believe, how many lines are crossed, in our stories. But I think this is a good place to stop for today, right? Like, I think we've covered a lot, and just to give you a taste of what to expect in the next podcast is we're actually going to start bringing guests on. Once we started looking at the program of the Heroes of Agape, we realized that our story will come out no matter what, so I don't want to beat a dead horse and tell those portions of our stories over and over, even though that'll likely happen when we relate to other people on the podcast. I feel like it'd be a lot more effective for us to get straight into the testimonies of people who have come through our program and work closely with our program, so that we can offer that to the public. So if you're interested in finding out more information, we have a page on the Agape website, which is agape4smb.com/Agape Heroes. You're welcome to visit that. We're also on social media, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. We have a presence on. We share clips from these shows there. So if you missed an episode and you don't have time to watch it all, a lot of those key points are shared in the clips. If anything, please give us a like and a follow and subscribe on YouTube, so that we are raising awareness. Like, even though you don't come back and interact with the content, you're, as you know, and as social media works, you're giving permission to do the same thing. It comes back to the analogy I always share about the dance floor. Like, so there's an analogy that I constantly share in medicine circles, and it's usually around integration, where people are not participating at a level that is sincere or authentic, right? So the analogy that I offer people is, consider going to a dance, right? Everybody buys tickets to the dance. The door opens at 8:00. Everyone takes a seat rather than the dance floor, and then 1, 2, 3 songs goes by. And until the alcohol kicks in, or some brave soul decides, this is my favorite song, this is why I came, I'm going to dance, whether y'all like it or not, takes the floor. And then all of a sudden what happens, the entire dance floor is full of people for the rest of the night. So that's the same thing that happens with social media. If people are not liking and sharing and subscribing, then people are looking at the small number associated with this video and saying, this is not worth my time. I don't see the value in it. So if you're seeing this, the least you can do is thumbs up, leave a comment letting us know what you'd like to hear in future episodes, or what you thought about this one. And it'll give someone else permission to interact with this content. This is a very new podcast, so if you can support us in that way, we'd greatly appreciate it. You can always directly contact us on Instagram, TikTok, on YouTube. With any questions. We also have our page on the Agape parent website, which is agape, 4, smb.com/Agape Heroes, is a page with information regarding our programs and our retreats. So we look forward to connecting with you, and especially in raising awareness for the support program that is Agape Heroes, and helping our veterans and first responders who are suffering no different than we shared with you in this episode. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think we covered a tremendous amount, more than I thought today, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that we did it.
Yep, and we had some technical difficulties that we'll try to sort out. So if you see chops in the video, or chops in the audio, that's exactly what that was, in full transparency. But in either case, we thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, this is the Heroes of Agape podcast, and we're pleased to see you. Take care.